I was chatting to Jeroen Bos from PR.co the other day. It's a site which helps you organise news so it's easier for journalists to consume. And he really got me remembering some of the worst press release pitches that I had ever received. Now, I recorded the chat with Jeroen. I'll play that in a second, but I just wanted to recount one of those worst moments for me. When I opened up the email, there were literally only a couple of lines in it, and it read something like this. It said, "Dear Sir, I have attached our newsletter. I hope you find something of interest that you can use on your show." This was when I was presenting the nightly news programme across London in the UK. There was nothing below those two lines, but I could see a PDF was attached. And this press release was so bad that normally you just delete stuff, which is kind of mediocre. But this was so bad, I thought I've got to open this PDF just to see what's inside there out of sheer curiosity. And it was bad. There was a 4-page A4 newsletter with lots of stories on it about what they were doing. I was not about to read that, so I deleted it. There was no way I was going to read through all that rubbish and probably find nothing there when other people were pitching ideas ready to go for me. And that was the experience that Jeroen and I shared when we were chatting away. He used to be a techie in the Next Web newsroom, which, if you don't know, is one of the pioneering news websites about the tech world, and it's been around for a few years. One of the things we agreed on was that while you definitely need personal relationships, even more so now than ever, to get a pitch in front of a journalist, it is just as crucial as before to have the stuff in that pitch that the journalist needs in order to be able to turn it into a story so that they can skim through the details and go, yeah, this is of interest to me. I've got what I need to go ahead with this. So let me play you this chat. And as usual, there's no need to take any notes as I'll pull out the key things from this in the newsletter next week. So that will be on thepublicrelationspodcast.com and you'll see the newsletter link there. And after I've played this, it's about 6 minutes with Jeroen, I'm going to look at some pictures and examples that I've experienced. And I spotted another press release today on a major company's website, which I'd like to break down as well, because I think it raises a lot of key points here and misses a lot of them as well. So let me play this bit first of all from Jeroen.
It all started basically when I had my own startup and I was pitching to the Next Web. And I was actually also an intern at the Next Web before that. I think that's sort of how it started. And then that's how I rolled into the Next Web a little bit later. And that's when they just started this project called PressDoc, which came from the issues that they were facing as the editorial team.
So give us an idea, because I think people that listen to this show love to get that insight into newsrooms and what journalists are doing. And it's quite fascinating here because you're talking about tech space here. We're not talking about general news. We're talking about tech. So what were some of the biggest challenges that you saw in the newsroom from the tech PR point of view?
Yeah, I think it's good to first set the scene a little bit. It's 2012-ish. So it's like all social media things are coming up. iPhone is just come out. Everybody's super excited about anything tech. And the Next Web was basically the center of tech in Amsterdam and the Amsterdam community. They had a tech conference and their tech blog, thenextweb.com. And they were basically receiving hundreds and thousands of pitches every day. Yeah. And they would flow in through their just a general inbox, their personal inboxes, email, anyone desperate for any attention about anything at all, basically. And it would be like ideas, like not even like a company that was founded at all. Yeah, and like they had like very obvious guidelines on their website on how to be reached. But even I was like working there and sitting next to the phone that was constantly ringing and people trying to like get in that way if they didn't receive an answer on their email pitch. But like in the end, they were dealing with like 3 problems, I think, if you see of sort of how PR.co got started, at least, and how that inception happened. That is like, first of all, the pitches that they received through email, at least then, were like always in terrible formats. Sometimes it's like a few one-liners and that's it. And people just don't really understand the job of a journalist. The job of a journalist is not to think of a whole story and write the whole story and find all that information everywhere. It's really to curate and pick the right news and what is newsworthy and publish that. And most of the people just didn't understand that. And that was very obvious to see. Or like a whole story about a CEO without a photo of the CEO, for example. Yeah. Basically any pitch that already looks like a load of work for somebody that is scanning through a whole list of pitches and an inbox that keeps on overflowing is basically already a no by default. Imagine opening a pitch and you'll see a Word document in there. Like it's 2012. You have to click on a Word icon which will spin up words on your machine. That would just instantly kill your productivity. Besides that, it would also be like just a lack of backstory, a lack of context, a lack of like boilerplate on a company, or maybe just what I said, like no imagery at all, or something to work with, or quote. That was like a very typical major flaw you would see in pitches coming in. Yeah, and then lastly, coming in cold without not knowing who the person is. And imagine reading through that inbox of all those kind of subject lines, and who is the one that your brain stops at? That's people of names that you recognize, or a brand that you recognize, or maybe a profile picture that you've seen before.
You're taking me back. I mean, you're bringing back sort of flashbacks of me being in the newsroom there, because it really is. It's just, and people sometimes go, oh, do journalists have a process? And it's more instinctive. It's like, well, look, if it's a waste of time, if there's nothing of interest to me straight away, you just don't even bother.
Yeah, it's like journalists are humans. So how can you pique a human's interest? And how can you make it as easy as possible for them? They want to do their job quickly and efficiently. So the more you can give them, the better it is.
There was a few things in there though. So what made a good pitch to, well, in this case, tech press? I mean, it's interesting. You said about the fact that having a known brand or something like that will always help. I mean, I will say to people that it's so important to build a personal relationship with a journalist. Now, that first in can be hard, but if you can find any way of getting in with a journalist and then getting to know them, you have got so much more chance.
Yeah, exactly. And that's also what they always said. Like, try to at least like establish some sort of relationship. Like, you could maybe meet each other beforehand. It could be on Twitter. It could be anywhere. At least having some sort of way of knowing each other beforehand will at least help you get your pitch noticed. And then, of course, it should be all about the content. But same with brand names. It might be very smart to just get your brand out there a lot in the beginning to just make sure people at least know about you. And from there, it probably starts rolling a lot easier, the ball.
Yeah. So what was the sort of really good one?
Yeah, I would say, really the pitch where somebody went through extreme lengths to make sure that all the issues for the journalists were basically cleared away. All the work was done and put in to make sure it's as easy as possible for them to publish. So there's a backstory, there's all the right information in there regarding the release, the pitch, also in terms of photography or maybe a logo and those kind of things. Video, if you're talking about a product, we should see a product and not have to Google image your product. And then, of course, it needs to be newsworthy, and that is something completely different. It's really about the content in the end, of course, as well. If it's something really nicely timely and it's just happening as, like, for example, right now with ChatGPT, something really cool could happen in the same time. If you can hit that trend, that could always really help, of course, and pique somebody's interest.
Yeah, I mean, just tell me a little bit though. You were obviously sat in there. You were obviously a tech person. You were interested in startups and stuff like that. How did it lead to PR.co? I mean, clearly here you didn't actually have to do a lot of research. You were just sat there watching this.
Yeah, that's true. So it really started because the Next Web, as being at the center of that tech community, also really saw all these companies thriving and becoming very successful, and they were covering all these companies. So at the same time, they also decided to start an incubator program and starting multiple startups under the Next Web umbrella. And one of them became PressDoc, and that's what it was called before. It was called PR.co. We call it PressDoc because it was like a press document, really a document, a way to get all those like answers answered within like one simple form.
Yeah, the checklist.
We really liked
what you need to do. Yeah.
Yeah, basically. And we as Dutchies really like that name, PressDoc, press document. But then as we grew a little bit more international and also more abroad and with like in the US, we realized a lot of people thought it was press doctor, and that we meant that we were like a press doctor. It would help you doctor your press releases. A lot of people actually had issues with that. So that's why we later rebranded PR.co. But also,
yeah, but PR.co is such an awesome name, isn't it? I mean, it's so clear what it means as well. That was a nice find.
And I really like the PR and the co, like the communications part. Yeah, I really like it. But really like what we built and what we set out to build back then, at least, is just a very simple site where you could create your account, fill in all the backstory of your company, all the back information, a little bit of history, just your social media links, all the contact information that somebody might require to ever contact you if they find you or want to work with you. And then once you start creating your press release, it was like really as like a checklist, basically, of everything that the people from the TNW editorial team required to be a good press release. So that would be like material, what is it? All the media materials, title, really a social media pitch was in there even, to really try to force people to concise it down to like a few sentences, 150 characters actually, when Twitter was still very hip, of course.
It was so good talking to Jeroen, and talking about some of the pain of what journalists see in the newsrooms. And this stuff so often really is a checklist. I mean, it's no wonder he's gone on to make the company that he has to do this kind of thing. But it really got me thinking, actually, just listening back to that then as I played it to record this podcast. Another thing was about boring headlines. You've got to have the stuff inside your story, but you've got to grab people's attention as well. And I saw a press release today, which I wanted to share with you. And the headline read like this. I'll read this out to you, okay? So it said, "Dreamy," in quotes, "amenity kits to showcase Western Australia's land, water, and skies." Well, I've literally no idea what that headline means. Do you? As a journalist, I'm already bored in my head. So let me actually open up this press release while I'm recording this podcast today. I'm gonna go through this. And I had a look at it earlier. So skimming down over the release, I can see that they've basically added an artist's artwork to the outside of those little bags that you get in business class on this particular airline. It's pretty boring so far, but let's see if there's a story. And here it is, okay? So halfway, you can't see me looking at this. Just imagine I'm looking down this press release. So classic. This is so often the case with press releases. Halfway down is the actual story. This is a major company as well. So what I'm reading here is that the artwork is Aboriginal, and it's created by an Aboriginal promotions firm. So I did a few more clicks, had a look up who this particular promotions firm were, and what I then find is that the artist is from an Aboriginal background themselves. So if we think about public perception, which you should always do when you're starting to think about how to pitch a story, so the Aboriginal people in Australia are seen as marginalised. So here's an Aboriginal creative agency with an Aboriginal artist drawing art about freedom and travel. Okay, so what I would have made my top story was not, I can't even remember what they said now, it's so unmemorable. My top line would have been, "Pioneering Aboriginal creative agency takes airline passengers into dream time," or something like that. Playing on those things that are going to trigger the audience's reaction. I don't know who that press release was targeted at, but for me, that doesn't work. It certainly doesn't work with my journalist head on. I think the problem, and this is what so often happens with big companies and organizations, when you're talking to them and trying to get them to understand a little bit more about how to pitch stories, is that they focus on themselves and not on the story. There's actually quite a good story in there, although it is pretty well hidden. And I mean, just looking down the press release as well, there's no picture, which was something that Jeroen was saying as well. I don't have a lot of time in my day, but if you are a regular listener to the show and you want to run a press release by me, then feel free. Because if I can give some thoughts on it that might help you to pitch it a little bit together, then go for it. You can reach me on LinkedIn. It is Richard Midson, Midson, Midson. No guarantee, so please don't be upset if I don't reply. I'll do the first few, and after that, I'll have to stop. So the key, definitely, when we're talking about pitches, of course, remains personal relationships. You've got to be able to open that door first. You're rarely going to be able to, get a chink into a newsroom without having got some kind of relationship first with people these days. There are other ways that I've talked about in the past as well. Half the battle is getting people's eyes on your pitch, but the next bit is about having the information in an easy-to-scan format so that they can get what they need out of it fast and decide if this is a story worth running. It is no different today to when I first started in journalism all those years ago. It might be easy to think also that if you are a well-known brand, that journalists are going to do more work to research this story and to look into it, but they expect you to have done all this work. And if you're a small business, then there's all that leeway, the fact that you don't quite know how to approach this stuff quite so well. But they don't have time to go through it because they're getting a lot of these smaller business press releases coming through with no story actually in them at all. So you've really got to make sure you're delivering this stuff. Another thing that killed press releases for me were people that didn't provide a contact detail for someone to be interviewed, particularly on the radio. And then you'd ring them up and they would go, "Oh, we might have someone available for you." And it's like, well, that's not good enough. Particularly not if you're running 2.5 hours of live news every day, as I was for several years. So looking back at Jeroen, let's see what are the key points. Now, as I say, I will sum these up in the newsletter this week. Establish personal relationships. Of course, he said that. I agree with that completely. Make your brand recognizable. Make sure that you are doing plenty of stuff in other marketing so that when a journalist searches for you, they find stuff about you to add credibility. Make sure you've got well-structured, newsworthy pitches. Give all the information that a journalist needs and make sure that you've got a nice, good headline as well. As I say, I'll sum up the other ones in the publicrelationspodcast.com. Click on the newsletter link there to sign up for that, and you can get that next week. And also, if you want more of this stuff, more of the Public Relations Podcast than you get, then don't forget also that I'm working on the Public Relations Podcast project as well. There's a button at the top of the website with the word project on it. Click on that if you would like to be part of that as well. I'm off to South Korea in 3 weeks' time, hoping to meet up with a TV reporter friend of mine there. If you're in Seoul, though, I would love to meet up with you too, so let me know too. LinkedIn, it is Richard Midson, Midson. Right, that's enough ranting and rambling for this week. Loads more stuff still to come. I hope you're having an awesome week, and I will speak to you real soon. Bye.